And now, for a discussion on rebuilding the arsenal of freedom. Please welcome back Chief Executive Officer of SAFE, Avery Ash, with Under-Secretary of War for Acquisition and Sustainment, U.S. Department of War, the Honorable Michael Duffey.
Thank you very much. And I see folks are still coming back in from coffee. I'd encourage them to accelerate, because this is going to be an action-packed but pretty quick session here. Thank you for being with us here today. We know that your dance card is particularly full right now. Revitalizing the defense industrial base, equipping the U.S. military for current conflicts in the Middle East, replenishing the arsenal to maintain deterrence. So thank you for being with us. As most of this audience knows, the defense industrial base has been a historic strength for the United States, and that our success is rooted in that broader industrial capabilities and competition. We've recently seen reports that the department is working to enlist General Motors and other predominantly commercial manufacturers to use their production capacity to produce defense systems, munitions, and other components, along the lines of a World War II arsenal of democracy. Can you tell us more about that effort, the response from industry so far, and what those challenges might look like?
Yeah, thanks, Avery. Thanks for inviting me to be here today, and thanks to all of you for participating in this important discussion. You're absolutely right. I think, first of all, there's a recognition of, on the part of the department leadership, that we need additional industrial capacity. We need modernized manufacturing. We need more robust supply chains. We need a stronger workforce. And so many of the things that we're doing relate to how do we put private capital in place, how do we bring expertise, and I think General Motors and our automotive industry is one of the best examples of manufacturing might within the country. And so we have nothing but opportunity to learn from these titans of industry and potentially partner with them. We do have what we've called the BOND program, Business Operatives for National Defense, recently introduced, which is identifying and recruiting retired executives from places like General Motors, Tesla, Ford, airlines, other places that are bringing that kind of know-how that the department hasn't traditionally had at its disposal into the department to help work with our industrial-based partners to ensure that this tremendous investment that taxpayers are making in our industrial base is reinforced with the latest and greatest cutting-edge expertise, technology, depth of experience that both the companies and the retired executives bring to ensuring that we've got the industrial base for the future that we need.
So with many of the military systems that we rely on and that you're working to procure, dependent on fragile or even adversarial supply chains, but in many cases, the demand that we have from the department is a relatively small portion of what the U.S. needs as a whole. How are your acquisition policies ensuring that our industrial base can reliably support those capabilities over time and reduce the dependence on foreign adversaries for those supply chains?
It's a key question. I think, the Pentagon for many decades was sort of always the thought leader, the innovator in the industries that we were in. Not the case anymore. And so, in November, the Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, rolled out the Acquisition Transformation Strategy, which was a very ambitious effort across 5 pillars and 38 initiatives to reform how we do our procurement, run our acquisition system. Among those are a few initiatives that are worth noting. One is commercial first. So when you talk about the fragility of our supply chain and our dependence on adversary supply, we're making an intentional effort within our acquisition reform effort to identify opportunities to prioritize commercial, whether it's, traditionally I think commercial first, people think about end items. I think it's probably more important to think about within the supply chain, how can we be pursuing, for example, microelectronics as a supply that comes from a largely commercial supply chain that will provide resilience, it will provide cost effectiveness, as long as we can ensure the security is there it reduces quite a bit of the risk that we would encounter from having very bespoke, fragile supply chains that I think that the department unfortunately has been dependent on for a long time.
Well, we are an organization that enjoys pillars as well. That was the big theme for our seminal paper last year and for the conference here today of the pillars of power. So we're very much on the same page there. You know, we think a lot about the uneven demand signals that can come from industry as being one of the biggest challenges to maintaining the defense industrial base. How are you managing and shaping demand signals broadly to maintain essential industrial capabilities during peacetime to ensure that when we need them, they're there?
Unstable demand signals, I think that was the most frequent frustration that we have found as we engaged with industry last year in lead up to the rollout of the acquisition transformation strategy. We recognized the munitions industrial base as the slice of our industrial base that was most opportune for us to come in and help introduce some reforms. And so in engaging with our industrial base, what we found in our analysis and our conversations was what actually has been around for a long time, which is a lot of frustration over the fact that our annual appropriation cycle introduces a lot of that volatility into our procurement patterns and our funding patterns. And so one of the outcomes that we've been able to achieve early this year is a series of deals with our primary munitions suppliers, Lockheed Martin and Raytheon, where we, with the help of Congress, who authorized 5 and sometimes 7-year multi-year procurements, we're able to sign initial framework agreements with these companies that did a couple things. Number one, it gave them a steady signal of demand over that 5 or 7 year period, with assurances that we were going to purchase at quantities that, number one, the warfighter needs, and number two, help the industry to justify any additional investment. Second thing it did was, in that industry investment, we've traditionally been funding industrial capacity expansion from the taxpayer through the Defense Procurement Act, or excuse me, the Defense Production Act, or the Industrial Base Analysis and Sustainment Fund. That just wasn't sustainable for the level of growth that we needed. So by striking these deals, we have incentivized industry to invest $25 billion of their own capital over the next couple of years to triple production capacity, for example, of the Patriot missile, quadruple the production capacity of the THAAD interceptor, Tomahawk. Okay, so we were able to achieve agreements from our industry partners, and the third impact of that was part of the agreement was a flow down throughout the entire supply chain. So I think one of the other frustrations is that demand signal flowed from the primes through the subs all the way down to, for example, the raw materials. A requirement of those agreements was that that stability of demand signal, that long-term 5 or 7 year order, had to flow down to the supply chain, which then we hope also incentivizes investments throughout the supply chain to give the stability we need to give us a more robust and dependable industrial base.
That's a great tee up for our next question. So at the Reagan Forum last year, you talked about incentivizing a flywheel of investment in the key components and the raw materials that we need. That's a space that SAFE spends a lot of time thinking about supply chain security. And it's a great metaphor. Can you please give us a little bit more about how you're thinking about, particularly in materials and minerals, that sort of flywheel and getting it started?
Well, this is another area where we've really neglected, I think, to maintain a domestic source of raw materials, rare earths, processing, mining, across the entire value chain of critical minerals. And they're just fundamental to everything that we buy. And so we did also last summer invest quite a bit of effort, and really since then, in examining where are the gaps in the supply chain in the raw materials space. And we had, of course, the rollout of the MP Materials deal last summer, which I think leveraged a range of tools that are now at our disposal: equity investments, loans, guaranteed purchase orders, in an attempt to overcome the, I think, distorting effects of the Chinese influence on that marketplace, and ensure that we can bring investment and bring capability back to the U.S. on these important critical minerals, raw materials. And I think that then also has an effect of attracting additional private capital, because U.S. government investment alone won't really energize what we need in terms of growth to rebuild those industrial-based components.
Yeah, and I think we've been very excited about the kind of breath of fresh air approach that the department and the administration has taken with trying to do things in a new fashion. You brought up the MP Materials deal, obviously one that has both seen a lot of support and some questions. Would be interested to how you would respond to kind of critics of those sorts of deals that aren't used to this sort of a way for the department to be operating.
Sure. Well, my first response is, what's the alternative? You know, we've kind of been existing in a laissez-faire marketplace for a long time, and I think that may be contributing to the fact that we find ourselves in the situation we're in. And so I think ensuring that we are leveraging the maximum capacity of tools at our disposal to attract private capital, to recognize and send a signal to the market that this is a need for us to ensure that we've got a resilient supply chain that's responsive to the long-term growth needs of the department is critical.
Yeah, and we understand that the Department of War does not want to replace private capital, and rather catalyze it. I think we've seen some good signs of that. In several of the recent deals, including the MP Materials deal and the Korea Zinc, we saw major private sector financing alongside DOW support. How does that work in practice? Is it up to project sponsors to bring private capital to the table, or does the government also play a role in helping to connect those strategic projects with investors?
Yeah, well, I think that's precisely the design, right? If our initial investment is the signal that there's a need, private capital, I believe, will come. In terms of the particulars of each deal, I think it depends on the deal. It depends on who the invested partner is. But we do have now, with Deputy Secretary Feinberg and his leadership and some of his team, some real expertise on how do we bring private capital conversation into the mix and ensure that we're sending that signal to the right partners in the financial community.
Great, and the FY27 budget request, if approved by Congress, would significantly expand the funding for critical minerals, defense industrial base, including through things like stockpiling and DPA authority. What do you see as the greatest leverage among those programs, and how quickly could the Pentagon deploy that capital?
Well, I think the budget proposal itself is a tremendous leverage point, right? 50% increase in defense spending from $1 trillion this year to $1.5 trillion next year. Clearly a signal to our adversaries in the world that the president means what he says when it comes to challenging our allies and our partners to extend their defense spending to provide for their own defense. But in terms of the opportunity that I think in terms of your question with respect to how quickly can we do that, we are actively attracting and recruiting folks from the financial community who can help us manage a broad range of potential deals in partnership with the experts at the Department of Defense, who have the recognition of where we have growth opportunity and needs within our joint force, and bringing those financial experts in to help us identify how are we thinking through and how will the companies be thinking through their balance sheet when they're looking at a deal, and what particular incentives are going to best attract the private capital we need to get the level of growth that we desire.
So recognizing the breadth of challenges and industries that you have in front of you, and we talked a lot about critical minerals and materials, I want to shift a little bit to the grid and electricity. So a stable and well-connected electrical grid is going to be critical for defense facilities, industry, and military operations. Earlier this year, when you rode in a C-17 to deliver an SMR to Hill Air Force Base in Utah, you had been quoted as saying, "Powering next-generation warfare will require us to move faster than our adversaries, to build a system that doesn't just equip our warfighters, but equips them to win at extraordinary speed." We know you're working closely with the Department of Energy on this project. From the Pentagon's perspective, what do you see as the most important next steps for strengthening the national grid and developing deployable power that will help us be more competitive?
Well, energy is always a critical enabler of national security. I mean, whether it's in the geopolitical sense, as we're seeing in world events right now, or in terms of actually being able to execute operations. I think the Valor Atomics event was unique in that it demonstrated that we have, where we haven't, while it's been a while since we've really invested in our nuclear power industry, I think it demonstrated that both on the Pentagon side and the Department of Energy side, really responding to President Trump's leadership to drive energy resilience into everything that we do. And I think the Pentagon can play a unique role as a first adopter, an early adopter for technologies like small modular reactors that might not have the momentum in the commercial space, and can clear some of the challenges when it comes to regulations or proving out the technology to help then hopefully reduce the cost and increase the speed of adoption within the broader electrical grid. And then I think we'll always be a stable customer once that technology gets hold and is depended upon for the warfighter.
Yeah, SMRs were a topic that came up on our first panel around AI and how do we win that race. You know, I think the theme was there's a lot of interest in the technology. There's a huge amount of potential there. The challenge is that first step. And I think there have already been some really good early signs of how this administration and the department are thinking about helping to start that flywheel going on the SMR front. So we're looking forward to more on that. As you're thinking about securing domestic supply chains for critical energy infrastructure, this is more on the security side. What role do you see the Pentagon playing in de-risking private sector investment for things like advanced grid and power technologies? And what does a successful partnership look like from acquisition and an acquisition and a sustainment standpoint?
Well, I think the energy supply chain is kind of secondary to the supply chains that we care about, but critical, right? So to the extent that we're looking at our supply chains when it comes to the weapon systems that we buy and build, we're putting some policies in place, in part in response to legislation like Section 805 of the FY24 NDAA that requires us to move away from adversarial sources within our supply chain in a very assertive way. And so as we're building our muscle memory in terms of building a domestic supply chain to support our weapon system needs, I think that has spillover into the energy industrial supply chain. And I think that there'll be, the more we have effort to provide a just-in-case, not just-in-time approach to our supply chain, and ensuring we've got a domestic component to as much of our critical infrastructure as possible, I think that will be a priority for many years going forward.
So recognizing the breadth and the complexity of the challenge that you have ahead of you, what will success look like in a year or 2 years or 3 years from now, from your perspective?
Yeah, I think, whenever I'm asked, how do you measure success? In my mind, it's a little abstract, but I think it really resonates with me when I try to measure the investment of my time and energy every day, which is how confident is our warfighter and how hesitant is the adversary. And so whether we're thinking about creating resilient supply chains so that they're no longer have influence in the dependability of our weapon systems, or the strength and robustness of our defense industrial base, which in itself I think can be a deterrent, especially when it comes to the threat of a protracted war, and ensuring that we'll not only be able to win on day one, but on day 60, day 90. And so thinking through what are the investments that we're making right now to modernize our manufacturing base, to ensure that we have a supply chain that can meet not just current needs but future needs, and I think they say I like the phrase that we want to win without fighting. So can we set up an industrial base? Can we set up a joint force that really makes our adversaries think twice about whether or not to challenge us on any given day?
So we've got corporate leaders, in closing, we've got corporate leaders from across the supply chain that we believe is necessary to secure here today. what would be your message to them of how they can work with you and DOW to fulfill your mission?
Well, I think, first of all, we want your innovation. We want another item I'll talk about in our acquisition transformation strategy is a relaxation of requirements. So how can we be less over-prescriptive of a technical specification that we need and more generally stating the problem that we're trying to help the warfighter solve and leave the innovation to industry? In some cases, there's a balance there. We need to have certain depth of description of what it is that we need to buy. But in other cases, I think if we're go with the old system and the old way of doing things, we'll never innovate. And so I think bring your innovations to us. One of the initiatives that we have in our acquisition transformation strategy is a defense industrial-based consortium, which will be an opportunity for us to more frequently engage with industry and more thoroughly understand what innovation industry has to offer to solve some of the problems that we're trying to solve for the warfighter.
Oh, well, I know SAFE and many of our partners are looking forward to working with you on that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.